We always record them when we remember. And so we are recording tonight's talk. And after tonight's talk, we will post the recording for this and all the other takeout talks. You can find the recordings for them online. We kicked off this year's Takeout Talk series with Sage Donnelly, who talked to the club 2 weeks ago about how to break down scary rapids. Tonight we've got progression. 2 weeks from tonight, we'll be talking with a bunch of experts from the gear manufacturers, from Kokatat and Shred Ready and Werner about gear. From there, we'll go to a discussion about diversifying paddle sports. And then finally, we'll end the Takeout Talk series with a conversation with Paul Kuthi on teaching your kids, if you have kids, teaching your kids how to kayak or canoe. So that's the Takeout Talk series. And then we also, on Thursdays, the first and third Thursday of the next few months, we have a safety series. And the next safety talk coming up is on shoulders, protecting your shoulders while paddling. From there, we're going to talk about winter paddling. And from there, we've got a whole session that's going to be fantastic on minimizing your risk if you happen to be lucky enough to be going down the Colorado River in the Grand Canyon. So again, check the website, and I'll put a little post in the chat to make sure that everybody knows where you can access all that programming. If you are a member of the Lower Columbia Canoe Club, thank you. If you are not a member, please consider joining. We've got members from all over the country. These largely because of these takeout talks and the safety series are free and open to the public, but your support helps us, continue to offer the great programming that we've been offering. And if you're thinking about joining and you just haven't gotten around to it, definitely try to get your membership in the next few days, because on January 31st, at the end of our January membership drive, we're going to be raffling off a bunch of fun prizes only for members. So the two prizes that are pretty exciting, one, we're raffling off a canoe. So a Dagger Ovation canoe has been donated by one of our longtime members, Murray Johnson. Huge thank you to Murray. So somebody could win a canoe. And the other thing that we're raffling off is following the takeout talk that we had 2 weeks ago with Sage Donnelly. Sage actually reached out and let us know that she was going to be in the Pacific Northwest in March and that she'd be happy to do a skills clinic for club members. So we have 10 spots available for intermediate kayakers who might want to, oh so appropriate, step up their paddling, the topic of tonight's discussion. You could have a session with Sage Donnelly, and 2 of those spots we're going to raffle off because it's going to be super high demand. So you need to be a member to be in the raffle pool to get on the river with the under 21 female kayaker of the year, Sage Donnelly. Okay, that is all the club news. Again, I'll put some posts in the chat. Tonight, super exciting. We are going to spend the next hour or 75 minutes talking about progression. And what can I say about progression? All of us started out kayaking or canoeing, all of us started at a certain point. And I'm guessing many of you, like me, thought, well, where's the list, right? Like, what do I need to be able to do in order to go from being a class 2 paddler to being a class 3 paddler? Or what do I need to be able to demonstrate before I can, get on that class 4 round that everybody's talking about? And you probably thought that for a little while you were just learning the sport. And then hopefully pretty quickly you came to understand that there really is no list, unfortunately. The decision about whether or not you're quote unquote ready to step it up is different for everybody. The factors that you might consider are different for everybody. And then how you feel about those considerations can vary from day to day, right? It could be a whole different conversation with yourself on a Tuesday in February, versus a Thursday in March. So it's a complicated topic. There is not necessarily an easy answer. And so as I thought about, well, who could I recruit to come talk to the club on this topic? I have to say, Jess, you were top of mind for me. And the reason for that is for folks that didn't have a chance to read Jess's bio. Jess and I met when I was a beginning kayaker. We met at a kayaking school called Otter Bar, which is in Northern California. And there's no way, Jess, that you would remember this, but I remember very distinctly being in the little learning pool with you, the pond, and you were teaching me how to roll. And I was, in my kayak, and I was flipped over, and you were cradling my head, and I was looking up at you, and you were looking down at me, and you were saying whatever you were saying. And I just sat there like looking up at this woman, and I could not focus on a single word you were saying because your accent was delightful. It was just so charming. You were just like, backlit by this sunshine, gorgeous, big smile, beautiful woman looking down at me. And I was in my head thinking, oh, she's being encouraging. Oh, I see what she's doing. Oh, she taught me that one thing, and now she's going to teach me this other thing. And I was like, oh, this is a progression. I think I'm in the midst of a progression, and I think I might actually learn how to roll because, this beautiful, well-accented woman is breaking it down for me into these easy steps. And you did actually teach me how to roll. And you taught me so much else, in that week at Otter Bar. And what was so clear to me, we talk about a lot, there are folks who are really good at paddling, and there are folks that are really good at teaching. And you are someone who is really good at paddling and teaching. You have perfected both crafts. And again, for folks who didn't have a chance to read Jess's bio, Jess and her life partner, Dawn, were longtime instructors at Otter Bar, which is really, an elite level of instructing. And you, at the time when I met you, you were doing the whole endless summer thing. You were spending, summers in the US and then summers back in New Zealand. You probably did that for years and years and years. But you always had your heart attached to your home kayak school, the New Zealand Kayak School. And 2 years ago, Jess and her partner, Dawn, actually acquired the New Zealand Kayak School. And I am so jealous of all the students that come through the New Zealand Kayak School. I cannot wait until it is safe for us to travel to you again. I will be on the first plane. So that is my introduction of Jess. Jess is going to talk to us for anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes, we'll see. And then from Jess, we're going to hear from Teresa Gryder, who many of you know as our safety chair. And when Teresa and Jess and I were on the line just before we welcomed folks from the waiting room, I said to Teresa and Jess, you two are like among my most absolute favorite people. And that is so true with regard to you as well, Teresa. When I think about progression in my day-to-day paddling life, I think about you. You have guided, counseled, helped, mentored, shepherded, stewarded, encouraged so many members of the club, so many women in the Pacific Northwest. I can't think of a single new river that I would ever think of going on without touching base with you. And so I can't wait to hear what you have to add to the discussion.
Thank you.
With that, Jess, I'm going to hand it over to you. And also, just for folks who have been joining us for some of these takeout talks, sometimes we do slides, sometimes we don't. And tonight we're just listening primarily. So if you want to do, those of you who are Zoom adept, you can expand your speaker view and you can see that ever so slightly backlit, beautiful face, because Jess is in New Zealand, where it's 21 hours ahead. And it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon somehow, which is amazing. Welcome, Jess. And then I'm going to get you, Jess, to unmute. Yeah, there you go.
Hi, good afternoon, evening, wherever you are. Thank you for the beautiful introduction, Deborah. It's a lot of flattery right there, so thank you. Just take a quick moment to introduce you to my little continent, almost. So I'm in a little place called Murchison in the South Island of New Zealand, and I am one of the co-owners of the New Zealand Kayak School. We even got these hoodies. We've got my partner and Dan and myself. We took over the business about 2 years ago, and we are the hosts of the kayak school. I guess before going any further, just a quick disclaimer. After years of teaching in the States, sometimes there's a language barrier where I speak Kiwi and everybody else is speaking American. So if there's something that I say that doesn't resonate, or you're a bit puzzled, or it's a mannerism that I'm unaware of, you're welcome to just write a message in the chat and we'll help kind of iron out some of those. So the kayak school, we operate for around 8 months of the year, from September through to April, and we teach anybody that wants to know how to kayak. So from beginner courses right through to advanced. We also are seeing quite a lot of pack rafters starting to arrive, and that sport's really taking off in New Zealand. So yeah, we are busy. As well as Dan and myself, we have a team of 3 instructors and then 2 kayak technicians who are almost on an apprenticeship, learning how to teach kayaking. And we took over the business 12 weeks before our first lockdown in New Zealand for COVID. So we've had a bit of a journey. Amongst other things, we have a small shop, and so trying to get freight from anywhere in the world is really hard right now. In terms of background, when it comes to teaching, is that sometimes I think it's easy to look at people that have taught a bunch of kayaking or paddling really well and just wonder if they sneezed and could kayak. And I just want you to know that I started right at the very beginning, and it was hard, and I cried and I cried and I cried, and I paddled a little bit and I cried and I cried and I stressed about going out on the river. And so I feel like the topic of progression is quite dear to my heart, from my very humble beginnings through to spending lots of time in the US, running hard multi-day class 5 trips with friends and new friends. So it's definitely been quite a journey. So I'm just very aware that it's quite a personal and subjective topic, and to just kind of tread a little bit delicately, just so that everybody can kind of hopefully take their own little tidbits away from there. As Deborah had mentioned, that so at the moment I'm not teaching much. I've got a 6-month-old and a 3-year-old, so I'm stitched up trying to deal with business and kids. But my last day teaching was 2 days ago. We have a kids course out this week. I think we've got 8 out this week, and we had 13 last week, so they're on their own progression. So without kind of any further ado, consider this next chapter a mix of personal experience and also looking at it from an instructional perspective, because obviously once you're in the role of teaching, our job is to be looking at what somebody is doing and how they're operating on the water, and then trying to make decisions that support the next step in terms of moving up or trying something different. And when there's a bunch of familiar faces and other instructors in this pool of guests to tonight's talk, just really aware that it is a little bit of a big picture process, because it is multifaceted, so not clean cut. And as Deborah said, that there will be opportunity for chat and questions. So if you've got anything you want to add, then let us know. To keep it kind of simple, we chat about there being essentially 3 dimensions to kayaking and the kayaking package. And we often pep talk people on their 2nd or 3rd day of a 4-day course with us when people are absolutely buggered, tired, knackered, whatever your terminology is, and everything feels a little bit hard, and there's this desire and want to get better and to achieve and to push, but things are tired. And so the little wee explanation that we use, which is very well related to progression, is this like kind of mash of 3 different things. The first one is the physical aspect to kayaking or canoeing or mountain biking or skiing or whatever it is that your sport is. The physical part of how you operate. There's also the mental part, and what that is talking about is your understanding and knowledge of the sport, the execution of skills, how it all works. And there's a few different models that support that in terms of what we can do both consciously and unconsciously, and things that we are competent at and not competent. So there's essentially how you can process that information and what you actually know about the sport and the maneuvers and the rest. And the third part, the third kind of chapter to this, which is not really tangible, and that's your emotional, I guess the emotional component to kayaking or canoeing. And what that refers to is your fortitude, your resilience, how you handle stress. And an example of the emotional stress, some of you will be familiar, and whether that's tears or stress or just being a little bit overwhelmed, that a way of that we kind of chat about it is you're in an eddy and you're just kind of working out what your next maneuver is, and you accelerate up to the eddy line and you get across the eddy line and you're in the new flow, and then for whatever reason you edging is a little bit off or something's not quite right, and the boat kind of lurches, it does a sudden little and what happens in that moment is your stress just goes, oh actually no, okay, it's okay, I'm okay, and then it calms, and then there'll be something else that happens that kind of jolts your stress back up again. And so that's what we're chatting about when it comes to the emotional part of kayaking, is that it's your stress levels and how well you kind of can tolerate what your threshold is for all of that. So the physical, mental and emotional, and I'm just going to chat a little bit more about those in depth to give you a little bit of information, big picture. Teresa's got an amazing quiz, the Whitewater readiness quiz, and so looking at the part that I'm about to chat about along with what she's got, I think they're quite complementary, one in terms of the big picture approach, and then one looking at I guess the more tangible, exact, measurable, being able to put a number or an answer on something. So in terms of the physical, and that's probably the most, I guess, tangible, and your ability to execute, I've just got some notes both here and on my screen, your ability to execute a skill or move on demand. And an example of that is perhaps if you're making moves at a fixed site, or you've just found this really cool eddy or wave, or you're doing a wee jet ferry. If you do it 5 times, how many times out of that 5 can you make it? You know, how many times do you almost make it, or how many times do you not make it? So it's a little bit about your consistency. And it's also talking about where you are in the river. So your positioning, knowing that the position at the start of a rapid determines the outcome later on. So if you're starting, for example, in the center, but you need to be to one side or the other, that by starting in the middle, that can make things harder, knowing you need to be somewhere versus starting in a position that will kind of feed you in. So wherever you put your boat or your craft has an outcome. The other part of that is how it feels to you. Are you feeling like, yeah, I got this and I'm doing well and it feels comfortable and I know what I'm doing? Or is it like, oh, something just happened and I'm not quite sure what that is? So some examples of you know, if you're looking at it from a strictly progression type thing, when you've got lots of repetition of a move or a skill and it is consistent, that's a really good indicator, like, hey, I've got this. I'm probably ready to look for something else. I'm ready to look for another move. I'm ready to look for a wee challenge. And when everyone kind of has a home stretch of water, the patch that you spend more time on than in other places. And when you find yourself looking for more activities that can also be quite a big stressor. So it's often...
Jess, I don't think I'm the only one whom you cut out for maybe like the last 5 sentences.
Oh, okay. Just one moment.
Yeah.
Is there any hello?
Now you're good.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Thank you for telling me. Yep. I don't know where we were, but there'll be plenty more chatter to continue. Please let me know if it drops out. If it drops.
You were saying you were like you were on your home run, and then you left us.
Yeah. So if you're on your home run, yeah, thank you. There's quite a lot of familiarity, and it's easy to have consistency on moves that we know well or intimately. When we are in unfamiliar terrain, trying to take those same skills and apply them in a new environment is a good, in a way, acid test for how those skills actually are. And an example for some of you that may have paddled in New Zealand, for example, there's a very famous run called the Kaituna in the North Island. And the Kaituna is short, it's well less than a mile. And it's almost like its own environment because it's dam fed, so the flows are always the same. It's very consistent. And so people learn what the maneuvers are on that particular run, and it becomes good and it becomes fluid and it becomes consistent. But then trying to take those same skills to a variable terrain can be a little bit challenging, and you may not have the same results. So in terms of the physical stuff, that you will sometimes get different results on own run versus new terrain. If in terms of stuff that I would be looking at for whether progression is the right step, there's a couple of red flags on there. One of them is that if you're lacking consistency with basic or simple moves, regardless of the stretch of water, you're trying to get more consistency, whether that's 2 out of 3 times or 4 out of 5 times before you step up. So make sure there is the consistency. If what you do gives you a random outcome each time, that's a wonderful thing to say, hey, hone this skill a little bit, spend a little bit more time here. The one other thing that we haven't actually chatted about yet is, as we all know, that whitewater is often an underwater sport, that making sure that you've got a roll that matches the terrain that you're on, okay? So if you can't really roll consistently in class 2, it's a little bit unreasonable to expect that that would work in a class 3 environment, yeah? If your roll works really well in a class 3 environment, then yeah, perhaps there's a good chance that it will work well in a grade up. But quite commonly, and we see this a lot with our intermediates coming through, that they've progressed through grades without necessarily having a roll or a primary safety self backup, and get here paddling class 3 but actually can't roll consistently. So regardless of your above water skills, making sure that you can you can roll in the terrain that you are on, so that you can take that to the next level. Hopefully that makes sense. Just, yeah, cool. Yeah, a few nods. Thank you. I think I can see 20 of you on here. And if you've got any questions about the physical aspect, happy to chat a little bit more or answer any of those questions. So the mental component of this, and now this big kind of mashed up ball of all three of them need to be kind of operating together. That, going back to an earlier explanation, the mental component is your understanding and knowledge of what is happening around you, how to read the river, understanding the other people around you and what they are doing. The mental part is how you anticipate outcomes, and anticipation is actually a really big part of water sports as well. And it's about being able to consider not just the moment right in front of your bow, but it's about being able to know that if this is happening now in 2 meters or 2 yards or 20 yards or 20 feet, whatever your measurement is, that things are going to happen, and it's trying to consider those before you get there. So for example, if you are a person that's paddling rapids and you get to the bottom and it's a giant blank, as in, I don't know what just happened, I'm at the bottom and I'm okay, that you need time on that so that you can have clarity around what happened and being able to be present. If you're blacking out for parts of your kayaking, it's about potentially stepping back a little bit to consolidate before you do move forward. With the mental part is that sometimes it will mean that you need to actually seek knowledge and understanding from other people that do already have skills. And so it might be seeing somebody make a move on the water and going, how do I do that? And going, I actually can work a little bit of this out myself. How do I get more information? And seeking some, it doesn't necessarily need to be professional information, but somebody that has an understanding of what they're doing so that you can take that information and progress with it. I think sometimes people are apprehensive about asking for information. So there's no harm or foul in just saying, hey, I saw you do something, like, how does that work? I want to know about that. So the more information that you have in your toolbox, so to speak, about different parts, that the more you have, the easier it will be to step through some of those progressions. And I have written down here that knowledge is power. And so that refers to the more that you can collect information about how things work and why they're working, that your brain can compute. And when you're computing, it means that you're present and feeling good about what you're doing so that you can then start moving forward. I haven't said, and I will just put it in now, is that I'm definitely aware that kayaking's not linear, as in you don't just start here and get better to here. It's very up and down. And it means that sometimes you might have some wins and it feels good. And then you might have you crash into a wall, you're upside down, fail to roll. And it can be something that does kind of bring you back down. So it's not linear for anybody. And it's understanding that that's normal. And it's okay to step back a little bit so that you can step forward. An example of that, so just downriver, and I know that Ben Morton is in here somewhere, I'm pretty sure we paddled on a section of river downstream on the Buller River called the O'Sullivan's to Ariki section. And so we have loads of amazing class 2 around here. I think there's like 5 different rivers that we paddle. And then O'Sullivan's is a really great place to step up to class 3 because it's got lots of big water and there's these amazing big flat pools. I'm just thinking of you, Deborah, right now, so that you can come and join us. We'll take you down there. There's big flat pools and then large rapids and then big flat pools. So in terms of progression, that you can have a run down there and then come back and do some more consolidation on class 2 and then have another run down there and come back onto class 2. So information and knowledge is massive. And that might be books, videos, questions, chatting, mimicking, asking, so many ways to collect that information. If you're blacking out or you're relying on other people to tell you what just happened, step back a little bit. So the third part to all of this, and it does have a little bit of crossover with the mental component, is your emotional capacity underwater. It's obvious to most paddlers that it is a really quick sport for increasing your stress levels, and I suspect that if we did a show of hands, then a bunch of you would have felt the stress or the pressure of being on the water and a little bit stretched or overwhelmed, and there's tears that just kind of sit like tickling at the back of your eyes, or something happens and you swim and it's hard and you need to still get back into your boat. So the emotional part of working out whether or not you're ready to progress is how you can manage yourself. So in terms of knowing that kayaking so quickly can go to plan B, so how your fortitude and resilience handles something going wrong and all of a sudden you're on plan B, how you manage that. Do you just give up and hope for the best and become a floater boater? Do you take a quick second, do a sweep stroke or two to realign your boat and then just kind of have at it? So it's how quickly essentially you can bounce back from a problem while holding it all together. Some notes that I have here: being composed under pressure, yet being able to hold it together. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that in just a second, because I've got a little tidbit that I use to help me. Being able to accept the errors that you make and parking it and moving on. Because if you have an error or a mistake or a failure on the river, a lot of the time the river doesn't care, yeah, and you clean it all up and you get back in your boat and you're ready to go again, and the river's exactly the same as it was. And so your job is to be able to park that little dilemma, cool yourself, and then be ready to go back out again. And so the more time we spend failing, the more time we have practicing the recovery from that. So it is worth noting that failure is important to a certain degree in kayaking, so you can practice your emotional bounce back to that. If things feel good and fun and you're really comfortable and you feel content, that's a great marker. Like, hey, maybe I am ready for a bit of a push. I am ready to go and do something, because we do this sport because it's fun, just in case you were considering why. Yeah, hopefully it's fun. And if it's not, great indicator to just go back along, just drop a step back on the continuum before you go. Some things to be really aware of that are good markers for not really, maybe just more consolidation of where you're at. If you go to the dark side underwater, and this is what I was referring to a little bit earlier that I would come back to. So for me, over the years, one of my biggest hurdles has been being able to hold it together underwater. That very quickly and for a long time, I just kind of panic underwater, this big like kind of flap underwater to eject out of the boat, swim. Yeah, and I had this amazing roll. There's like just textbook. I could outroll everybody all the time, except for when the water was moving around me and my brain just used to shut down. And so it took me a long time to work through that. So I have a massive appreciation for the struggle that it takes to take your roll from flat water to moving water. And so what I started doing over time is that I have a wee traffic light system underwater. And I've actually, as I've had two babies and getting out paddling as much as I can, that I do find myself going back to this model. So underwater, my instinct is, oh, this is bad. This feels red. This feels hard and I'm stressed and I know it. And when I know it, I actually have a chance to do something about it. And it's just going, okay, everything feels red. I need to choose green, which is calm, do my roll, wiggle around to the start, tuck up, do my roll, off I go again, okay? Sometimes when I've been paddling a lot, that when I'm underwater, that feels really obvious. It's just straight to green. Yep, cool, underwater, roll back up. No big deal. It's just like any other stroke. And then sometimes there's the orange, which is the like, a little bit stressed, but I think I'm okay, cool, reset to green, and then off I go. So I I just got a rewind, a dagger rewind, and they took like a year to get here to our little island in the Pacific Ocean. And I just spent a lot of time upside down, surprisingly. And I don't know if it was just the boat or me or whatever, but I did a lot of rolling on my first trip in that. And I just felt that whole like, you know, kind of red, oh my gosh. And then being able to kind of hold it together. And so by the end of the trip, finding that I could kind of hold it together in green. And it's like, actually what this is telling me is that I need consolidation. I don't need harder. I need time at this difficulty so that I can kind of regroup and calibrate before moving on. So there's a lot of, yeah, it's very holistic and it is very big picture. And I think that's why hopefully you'll find that Teresa's information is a nice kind of, it's kind of the same information, but a bit more specific. And at the end of the day, I think that there's a balance between the physical skills that you can execute. Yeah. And that also stretches to your fitness and your strength and how your boat fits, the type of boat that you're paddling. Then you've got that mixed in with the mental, how your brain is computing the information around you and what you're doing and being able to do that on demand. And then that emotional component of how you hold it all together when it doesn't go well. So I like this kind of bundle of everything kind of all meshed in. Stepping back a bit, the way that our days here work is we often run a rolling session in the morning, a skill session during the middle of the day, and then a river trip in the afternoon. And part of that is because most of our rivers are 10 to 15 minutes drive from here. So it's easy to kind of yo-yo and come back in. And what happens is with the clients and participants that we have on our courses is that at the end of a session, as the instructor, you're kind of computing, what do we do? How did this work? What's the next little step for this package of people so that they can get a little bit more without biting off too much? And so we talk about having different themes for sessions. So it's like, is this trip about consolidation? Is this trip about just pushing a little bit more? Are we going to change the boats that people are in? So it's just trying to find the smallest increment of progression while still meeting people's needs. And sometimes that means that on day 3, when people are tired, that you actually just take them back to flat water and you run a skills session. So there's a lot of consideration to how to progress people. And I think in a nutshell for us, this is one of the models that we use to manage that. But it's very subjective, it's very individual. Just because you do it one way doesn't mean that it's going to fit for somebody else. So I think that's probably enough chat about those 3 things. And if there are any questions, you're welcome to put those forward. Yeah.
Love it. Thank you, Jess. You've had a few comments coming in, but one in particular, how helpful the green, yellow, red thinking is, that just that framework is really, really helpful. And then of course, everyone is happy that there'll be some flat water pools waiting for me at the bottom of some of the rapids that you might take me down when I visit you in New Zealand. We all love our pools at the bottom. We could go in one of 2 different directions. Teresa, I think I want to give the people a little bit of what they came for, which is to say, I think I want to throw up just 1 or 2 of your quiz questions before we segue. Yep, Teresa, to you, only because I saw Kim asking for the quiz in the chat, and Jess alluded to the fact that she's thinking relatively big picture, and the quiz that you have developed, I think, is going to help hammer home some of the categories that Jess talked in. So why don't we do this real quick? Humor me. I am going to throw up. So, and again, for folks that may not know what I'm talking about, Teresa Gryder, safety chair for the Lower Columbia Canoe Club. How long have you been working on this quiz? Maybe a year at least?
I I don't know. I think it's been up on the web for several years. I've got it dated 2019.
2019. And I have to imagine it's like, might it have been because so many people were coming to you wondering whether they were ready to step it up?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That was the question I get all the time. And it's like, well, I hear a lot of stepping it up, and I want people to talk more about stepping back and consolidation. I love to hear that.
Yeah. Oh, good. All right. Let's do this. I'm going to throw up the rolling, ferrying, and catching eddies part of Teresa's quiz, just to give you all a little bit of a sense of what some of these questions are. That might help guide your thinking about where you're at on the continuum. Can someone give me a thumbs up that you can see the quiz? Oh,
I
good.
can see it.
Yay. All right. So we'll let a few of you weigh in on where you're at. And I think it's anonymous. Hopefully you shouldn't worry about what you say. I'm just going to give it another few seconds. It looks like almost half of you have played. Thank you for playing. All right. Let me see. I believe I can end the poll. Raise your hand if you'd be super upset with me if I ended the poll. I think we're good. All right. And honestly, I don't even know if I need to share the results. Do I need to share the results? Yeah. I mean, I'll throw them up just for kicks. Can y'all see them? I mean, you know, it is so individual, right? That's the whole point. So it almost doesn't matter what the group's aggregated results are. It's about where you're at. I'm curious. I'm looking for a volunteer, someone who would unmute themselves and share with us if anything came up for you while you were taking the quiz. Like, did you love it? Did you hate it? Did you wish there was somewhere to hide? That's how I feel when I take this quiz. I feel like there's nowhere to hide, and I have to answer honestly. I don't like it. Hi, Finn. Do I have any volunteers to tell me?
Deborah, I'll chime in.
Yeah, go for it, Ben.
So can you repeat your question one more time now?
Well, my question was just simply, how did the quiz make you feel? Or
Well, I'd say
what did you observe about it that you want to share?
it certainly makes you kind of check in with your own self-awareness. I mean, I definitely feel like, scanning through those, I kind of scanned down to the most extreme and then found myself going one step up and just being like, hey, that's just where I am right now. And I'm good with that. But yeah, I think, nice kind of, it's a really nice prompt to get you to think about those things and hopefully check in with yourself, and hopefully your self-awareness is somewhat accurate. otherwise you have a professional like Jess that can help you with, you know, understand your self-awareness a little bit better.
Yeah. Teresa, what came up for you? Just seeing it in action. I think I saw something in the chat that you were saying you answered it, you almost answer it differently every time.
Well, yeah, it changes. My fitness changes, my role changes along with my boat. I recently got a boat that I can hand roll. After having not had a hand roll for years, I can hand roll again. And that just makes me so happy, but I still don't have the confidence that I'm going to hand roll up if the river takes my paddle away. So I couldn't say that option honestly. So it changes. It definitely changes every time.
Yep.
Yeah.
Kay,
I'm not too embarrassed.
Yeah. Kay, did I see you wanting to chime in?
Yeah. It reminded me of like specific things that, you know, I kind of shy away from because I'm, you know, fearful of them. Like, and I was giving Teresa a hard time the other day. I'm like, you can't ask two variables in one question because like I'll be comfortable with going over a wave to the other side of the river, but using a hole or willingly going into a hole, no, not so much. And that's just kind of, you know, points out some of those areas, you know, that I need to work on, you know, and instead of avoiding them, kind of like, okay, you know, you got to work on this.
Right. Yeah. And I'm seeing some good comments come in through the chat too. Jamie saying, I think it was interesting to categorize my progress with more specifics than, you know, with more specifics than just, I'm a pretty good paddler, I'm an okay paddler. So we, you know, just now, right, we threw up 4 of the questions and they were largely about, you know, the physical, some, you know, the hard skills, if you will. But Teresa shared the link to the quiz online, and we'll also be sharing it out to everybody when we share the recording. There are 11 questions, and they flow really nicely with Jess's talk in that there's questions on, you know, your mental state, questions on, you know, how you're feeling, physical, et cetera, et cetera. I love the quiz, Teresa, and I don't love it, you know, I've taken it many times. I've never scored myself because for me that, you know, I didn't care what my score was. I just really appreciated being asked to think about where I was in the various categories. And I know that you've been tweaking it and perfecting it. So, you know, we've got 106-ish people on the line. So as you're taking it, you know, once the call is over, if you have thoughts or feedback, you know, absolutely please send it in.
Yeah, please do, because I'll fix it. Especially if there's any major area that I've completely not addressed.
Yeah. So that's the quiz. Everybody was wondering what's up with the quiz. So now I want to go back to my regular programming and say, Teresa, any thoughts or reflections from the comments that Jess shared and or other areas for us to explore as we think about progression?
Well, I love breaking it down into those 3 categories, and I especially love it because all 3 of them are the human factor.
Right. Yeah. Which is the
physical is perhaps less, but the mental and then emotional, which, you know, is kind of mental, but it still is. It's all us. It's how do we respond to the environment. And it's different for every person. And so every person's progression has to be different. You can't base it on what someone else did ever. But so I just really appreciate that. And the thought about consistency, which came up several times. Thank you, Jess. Just the idea that you're not ready for class 4 because you ran a class 3 rapid. You have to run quite a few class 3 rapids and actually demonstrate that you can do it under control, with intention, safely, before you even need to think about the next step. And what I see is people trying to progress far too rapidly and getting themselves into trouble because they don't have the skills they need for that next step. And they really need to repeat the skill enough times that it becomes second nature, that it becomes easy and fun.
Yeah.
The mental part about reading water and the group and being able to predict what's going to happen. And Jess was saying, where you start, you need to know what's going to happen, whatever distance downstream or a few seconds or minutes into the future. And I was thinking hours also, because when you're planning a trip, all of that matters. Will you get off the river by dark? That would be nice. And the red, orange, and green settings, wonderful. It sounds like basically if you flip over and you're in the red setting, you're going to boot out of the boat because you have no, you're not able to pull together to think, I know how to roll and I'm going to do this. So you're just like on instinctive fear response. And the yellow, you're thinking, you have fear and you're still thinking and you're working it out. And then green, you're like, I know what to do and I'm doing it. And then if you get hit in the head with a rock and you go to yellow for a second, and then you come back to green and roll up anyway, so much the better. Yeah, it's a great way to think of it.
Yeah.
Oh, and I heard one phrase that I'm going to use, floater boater. Floater boater.
Teresa, if you call me that, I will kill you.
Well, I don't know. What did you mean by that, Jess? What's a floater boater?
Dan, so credit to Dan, who has 3 different rules for teaching. The first one is to look good, which means that even if you don't know what you're doing, put your gear on properly and pretend like you got this, because it means a lot for your internal talk when you're like, I got this. Yeah.
Sure.
The second rule is to keep your upstream edge up. Generally applicable to just about everything. And the third rule, is do something. And do something is actually probably one of the greatest pieces of generic kayaking advice that there is out there. And it's so easy, and it happens to all of us from time to time, where something happens, a wave hits your kayak and it turns it, and all of a sudden you're going somewhere else, and it's how you respond to that. So the floater boater, especially if you are dealing with orange or red, that you're kind of like, oh, and you just wait, and it's just like something's going to happen because you haven't done anything. And what you're trying to do in that moment is do something. Take a paddle stroke, make a sweep stroke, look over your shoulder to see where you're going to end up, do something. And I find it quite it's almost funny sometimes when I've seen it be used, because it's just not that helpful and not that specific, but it's yet still a great piece of advice. So the opposite of floater boater is do something.
Yeah. So that was, it was look good, and what was the second one?
Keep your upstream edge.
Edge.
Yeah.
Yes. I love it. That's 3 more good things to remember.
What about Professor Teresa? I was just going to say, what about either one of you? I mean, I think you've both said, mistake that you see made all the time is just wanting to progress too quickly. Are there any other when I see that, I think, oh, no, not yet, or mistakes?
So I feel like we do a lot of recovery kayak training. And what I mean by that is people who have done a little bit of kayaking, a little bit of training, and somebody says, oh yeah, come with us, you'll be fine. If anyone ever says to you, you'll be fine, that is a red flag that you need to double check what they're telling you is a good idea. Okay. And so we deal with a lot of people that have had a really hard or rough time, and then actually trying to find the joy, rebalance, calibrate, work out where to from here. And one of the main reasons is because someone said oh, you'll be fine, yeah, it's all good, just come with us, and they do progress too quickly. And sometimes you get through that. Sometimes there's an incident, sometimes there's an accident, sometimes there's a fatality, sometimes you get your gear stuck. There's a lot of things that can go wrong when you do move too quickly. And just a personal note that in my first year of kayaking, which was me studying outdoor education at a polytechnic in New Zealand, and I got the advice that I was given by one of our tutors was to do 50 days on class 2. And I did my 50 days and I went back to him and I said, I've done my 50 days. And he said, how do you feel on class 2? And I burst into tears in a room because I was still incredibly stressed. And he said, maybe your things are telling you need to do another 50 days on class 2. So I diligently paddled 100 days on class 2 with a couple of like little, dip my toe into class 3 and then come back to class 2. And for me, that's probably the only reason that I was able to stick with the sport was I needed time. I needed to be able to work it out. Without being, I don't know, we see quite a lot of late teens and 20-year-old males who have a little bit of a semblance of a role. And it's like, have role, will try. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I'll come on this class 3 trip. Yeah, I've kind of got a role. Sure, I'll come with you. And so that can be a really easy quick progression, and it's all good until it's not. So it's just something to be aware of, that I think people do need their own period of time, however many days it is, so that things feel good, things feel green, that you're not stressed and flustered. But it can be quick. It can be a quick transition for some and less for others.
My beginnings were humble too. It took me a long time to learn to roll. It took me a long time to get to any harder water. And it was okay. I mean, I was the kid swimming in the eddy while my dad was boating. So I started early, but it still took a long time. Yeah.
Teresa, you, I feel like, again, before we launched the chat of the whole group, you noted that you'd been doing some reading about the optimal. Now might be a good time to share what you were sharing with Jess.
I'm still reading this book. I'm like past halfway through. It's The Rise of Superman by Steve Kotler, and it's about adventure and extreme athletes and the flow state, which we talked about in our human factor talk last Thursday. But I just this morning came across a section that applied to progression, and I wanted to read a passage or two. Okay. The challenge skill ratio is the last of our internal flow triggers. So the right ratio of challenge to skill helps put you in the flow. And the flow is this open state where you're taking in a lot of information and you're not afraid, and you're able to improvise and try things. So the idea behind this trigger is that attention is most engaged, i.e. in the now, when there's a very specific relationship between the difficulty of a task and our ability to perform that task. If the challenge is too great, fear swamps the system. If the challenge is too easy, we stop paying attention. Flow appears near the emotional midpoint between boredom and anxiety in what scientists call the flow channel, the spot where the task is hard enough to make us stretch, but not hard enough to make us snap. And he makes the point later on that it's really easy to accidentally end up overloaded, to bypass your optimal range and be too stressed out to function. Really easy to end up there. And it's really easy for bad things to happen when you go there as well, especially in a natural environment. So the sweet spot keeps our attention locked in the present. When the challenge is firmly within the boundaries of known skills, meaning I've done it before and am fairly certain I can do so again, the outcome is predetermined. We're interested, not riveted. But when we don't know what's going to happen next, we pay more attention to the next. Uncertainty is our rocket ride into the now. So that little bit of uncertainty, just a little bit, just the 4%, is enough to make you learn really fast. But when you go too far into the uncertain, don't have the skills for it, that's when it all falls apart.
Love it.
That was my nugget for today. I really enjoyed learning that.
I love it, Teresa. Have you, remind me, have the, I know your skills clinics kept getting, pushed off because of high flows, but have you done one this year in the new year?
I haven't done one in January, no.
Okay, and so the February one is coming up.
It's coming up soon, although I do still teach a few skills every time I go paddling, because I just do.
I believe me, I know.
Well, people have to ask though. They're like, yeah.
Yeah. I'm wondering, for the skills clinic that you have coming up, there's things that you'll be more focused on as a result of tonight's discussion, or things that clicked for you?
Well, I wish that I had a really nice short class 2 run, because that's what I'm thinking I'd like to do. And I want to do some skills around eddy lines, falling leaf and spinning on eddy lines and sitting in tiny little eddies and trying to stay there for 5 minutes. And just the things that seem so difficult until you do it a few times, and then it starts to make sense. Mm-hmm. And you have to do it on easy water at first. So that's kind of what I was thinking about doing.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Well, let me open it up for any questions from the audience. Are there things that that you've been thinking about in your own paddling where you're a little bit stuck and you might want to have the benefit of some Kiwi wisdom, or any thoughts or reflections from people on the line about things that you've heard? And you can either unmute yourself or hop into the chat, whichever works. While we're waiting perhaps for a question to come in, I'm also reminded, Ben, of something that you said to me. I don't know, I think it was one of the times that I did a little one-on-one with you, and we were on the middle white salmon, and I don't even remember how you phrased it exactly anymore, but your point was basically, well, did you make the eddy or didn't you? You're just like, there are moments when you could use just actual, objective, factual information. You did not make the eddy, Deborah. I was like, okay, but I tried. So I always think about that. And marrying that with your advice, Jess, do I consistently make the eddy? Do I make it 5 out of 5 times? Here's one. Jess, any tricks on how to not let the oops, the crap move, swim, etc., carry on down the river with you? How to leave it behind?
To be honest, that's probably been one of my biggest struggles with the sport. And I don't think of myself as a perfectionist, but I think I am a little bit. And that's probably one of the reasons why I've stuck with the sport, is just hungry for more and making it better and all the rest of it. But it's hard, and it was really a big journey to just say, actually, it's okay that I screwed up, and it's okay that I swam, and it's okay that this happened, and it's happened, and just being able to just make peace with that so that I can then get back in my boat and continue. And I think that it's really important to understand that you need failure to be able to give yourself the opportunity to work out how to make peace with that over time, so that it does get quicker and quicker and quicker, so that you can move on. And I think it's really easy to stop and get caught up and hung up on a mistake that you've made. But for me, probably time failing in easy water where it's okay, to get the opportunity to work on it, to be able to park it and keep going. And we were on I can just thinking of a number of beatings that I've had all over California and Washington, where it's like class 5 swim, but you're on a multi-day trip, so you need to work out a way to keep going. And it was only with time on easier water and lots of repetition and mileage and failing to, this sucked and I'm not happy, but I need to put it over here and continue. So I think it's time, and failure's okay. Opportunity to work out how to make peace with that in a hurry.
Just with that question in particular, I'm reminded, Teresa, of one of the questions in your quiz, which is about your crew. And I would add to the, how do you move past it? And part of that for me has always been about having just, a really great crew where I'm just dealing with my own stuff after an incident. I'm not worried about what they're thinking about what just happened with me, right? And I think I hear that a lot, oftentimes that, I don't want to swim, or I don't want to portage, or, I don't want to walk because I don't want to inconvenience, the people that I'm with. And if you're genuinely feeling that way about the people that you're with, it might be time to reevaluate who you're paddling with. Jess.
So on that, I think that at the end of the day, nobody cares what you did or didn't run. Nobody cares if you portaged it or you didn't portage it. Nobody minds about all of that. Your job is to work out how you as a paddler can contribute to the team that you're out and about with. One of the things that I learned over time is that I do food and mood, which means that I'm not necessarily the strongest when I've been out on hard trips, but I was there with my camera. I was there with the throw bag. I portaged quickly, and I always portaged more than everybody else. And I would be at the bottom of the rapid in a good mood, just like, yes, I'm ready. And by the way, when you're finished, come and see me because I've got chocolate. And so nobody cares that you don't run the rapid, because I'd found my own way of giving back to the team without sort of taking. And I think that it was about paddling, for me, some of the hardest stuff, paddling with people that I loved and trusted and cared about. But it's also, if you are held up a lot by what other people think, that my question to you would be, are these the right fit, these people the right fit for you on the water? Because once you find a paddling tribe, so much stuff gets easier, like physically, mentally, and emotionally, seriously. So, yeah. And also just paddling with other people that know that failure is okay, because we actually have to fail to be able to practice our role. We have to fail to be able to make peace with the mistake and move on. So it shouldn't matter, just be awesome, or find your own way of being awesome in terms of what you contribute.
Thank you, Jess. I'm looking forward to continuing to building my skills, feel better about being out on the water, comfortable in my boat. That is awesome, Grace. Thank you for sharing. We try to start on time and end on time. So the right tribe is everything. Kevin is so right about that. I am so glad, Jess Matheson, that you were in my tribe. I actually said to my son, Owen, hopefully people didn't hear him singing just now, but I said, Owen, Jess Matheson's going to get on the line with us tonight. And he literally said to me, who's Jess Matheson? I was like, and then I was like, Jess. And he's like, well, why did you use her last name? I was like, sorry. So my son Owen says hi. Crew is super important. I have so much less anxiety paddling with people I trust. Absolutely, Alicia. Absolutely. All right. Well, to everyone that joined us tonight, thank you so much. Watch the, if you're a member of the Lower Columbia Canoe Club, watch the calendar of events. We have actually a lot of great paddles coming up. And Brian Stewart just hosted a Class 2 paddle last weekend, Saturday, just a few days ago. He's got a home right on the river, right on the East Fork Lewis. So the folks that participated in that Class 2 paddle had a private put-in. It was sunshiny and beautiful all day. At the end of it, they went back to his place for, a little barbecue chat and, socializing. So we have plenty of Class 2 runs coming up, plenty of Class 3, and the occasional, 3+4 run. So let us know how we can support you in your own individual, unique progression. Thanks, everyone. I'm just watching all the thank yous come in for you, Jess, and for you, Teresa.
Thank you for having me, and on behalf of the Kayak School. And we do education and progression, so that's what we do. So lovely to be able to share a little bit of information. And if you have any more questions, fire them at us or at Deborah, and we're happy to answer. So
well, I have a question. Where are you based?
Me?
Yeah.
Murchison, South Island, New Zealand.
South Island. Okay, I've never been there. It's on my list.
Oh, you should. You should.
Yeah.
You and me, Teresa. It's on my bucket list.
Oh yeah. That and Japan.
I'm going to go to New Zealand first.
Maybe we'll sail there.
That sounds good.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Yes, thanks for coming. So good to see all of you. And Jess, thank you for being willing to come talk to the Lower Columbia Canoe Club.
She didn't know any better,
So cool.
Teresa.
So cool.
Oh gosh. It's been, he's not there anymore. That was such a great little cameo.
Yeah, that was good to see, Ben.
Hey, Jess, do you know Bruce Leslie?
Yes. Not well, but yeah, he is a face that has been in and out.
And his wife, I think now. I met him on the Clackamas River here in Oregon like years ago.
Yeah.
He was like with a bunch of Kiwis boating, and he was like, ah.
Yeah, I think I have a picture in my head of who you're talking about. I'm sure.
He's bald.
Yeah. Yeah.
Has been for a long time, but I mean, I can't remember his now wife's name. Tanya. She's a kayaker too, I think.
Awesome.
How about Scott Harding?
Oh
From
yeah.
Otterbar.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a name I haven't heard of in a long time.
You know Scott too?
Do you know this?
I went to undergrad school with him. Geology. He was doing geology.
I visited a friend to drop off some house plants a couple of days ago to her new house, and it had a photo taken by Scott Harding of blown up, like huge, of he had a really famous image of, or well-known image of, kind of half above water, half below water, of a salmon swimming through rocks, and it was just right there. So he actually had just been on my radar in the last 48 hours.
Cool. Yeah, he's working for AW now.
Hey, Teresa and Jess, we actually have a under the wire last minute question for you guys. And Kate, I don't know if you can actually unmute yourself and undo your video because they're still here. One last question. Any thoughts on getting better? Hi, Kate. On getting better and learning the terms for kayaking. I feel like I'm always having to clarify terminology. Do you want to talk about that a little bit, Kate? So you just feel like you don't.
Like on all the webinars, I'm always learning like new terms. I'm usually doing those things. I just don't have words for them. So
yeah.
Oh,
like floater boater? Don't learn that one.
Like bow surfing.
Oh.
Right. Well, how long have you been kayaking now? So I know what school you're in.
Just over a year. We started winter of 2020. Unfortunately, last summer I wasn't able to get out much. I'm in Ohio as well, so I'm having to travel like Pennsylvania, out of state, to really get much going. Mm-hmm. Our local run only runs here in the winter, so
yeah. Well, there's a book written by William Neely, who is now deceased, called Kayak. And it introduces a lot of the really important concepts and terminology for the intermediate kayaker. So you will be approaching that, and it would be a fun read, I'm sure. I've been collecting river slang for going on 35 years now. So it's unpublished. It's a dictionary of slang, but it changes so fast that, it's just hard to keep up. You just have to keep asking, what do you mean by that?
Okay, so long as I know that that's my future.
Yeah.
I would also just keep tabs on words that pop up that you're not sure about, or asking a range of people, like, I'm doing this, what do you call it? And because Dan and I have spent so much time teaching in New Zealand and in the States, and also a bit in Australia and Canada, and paddled all over the world, that things aren't always called the same thing. And so there's that whole, what your local language or slang is can be quite different as well. And so I would ask, like, I'm doing this, what would you call it? Or if somebody, you hear a word saying, I heard this word, ask somebody that you trust, like, can you show me what you think that is?
That's a very valid point too, so thank you for sharing that.
Awesome. Thanks for the question, Kate. And Kate, are you the same Kate who reached out and said you'd be willing to help with e-letter stuff and communications? Is that you?
Not me.
Oh, shoot.
I'm the one that sent a bunch of notes for the Sage Donnelly talk.
Oh, thank you. Those were very helpful. Yeah, your name is just, it's familiar. All right. Well, you have closed us out with your last question. We'll call that the last. Yeah, so good. Such a good one. We'll call that the last official question. And one more time, thank you, Jess. Thank you, Teresa. We'll get the recording out to folks shortly. And I don't know, Jess, tell Don he's next.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I will. And it's lovely for us to be able to put thinking, instructional teaching hat on for a chapter. So yeah, thank you for the opportunity.
Bye, everyone. Good night.
Bye, everyone.
Good night.